I always looked at John as somebody who had been there before me and who was doing it the way he wanted to do it. And I always admired and respected him for doing that.
He was the man in black, the voice of rebellion, redemption, and raw truth. But behind the legend of Johnny Cash was a friendship so deep, so unshakable, that even 60 years of fame, scandals, and personal battles could not break it. That friend was Willie Nelson. Together they were not just country music partners, they were brothers in every way that mattered. And now at 92, Willie is finally opening up about the secrets Johnny carried, the dark nights they survived, and the bond that no one else could ever understand. What did Johnny reveal only to Willie? And why did Willie wait all these years to share the untold stories of their friendship? Quick pause. Most of the people watching right now aren't subscribed. For this channel, every single subscriber matters. It's what keeps us going and lets us bring you more stories like this one. So if you're enjoying the journey, hit that subscribe button. It takes a second, but it helps us keep these legends alive for years to come. In the early 1960s, Nashville was more than just the capital of country music. It was the testing ground where dreams either took flight or crumbled. Johnny Cash had already carved out his place in history with hits like I Walk the Line and Folsom Prison Blues. His deep baritone voice carried the weight of a man who had lived hard and loved harder, and his reputation was already cemented as both a star and a rebel. Willie Nelson, on the other hand, was still a wandering soul, drifting between odd jobs and late-night gigs, his guitar case filled with songs that Nashville executives thought were too strange or too raw to ever sell. Fate brought them together not under bright spotlights, but in a dimly lit Nashville bar where artists gathered not for fame, but for survival. Willie had admired Johnny for years, long before they met. Back in the 1950s, when Willie worked as a DJ in Texas, he would spin Cash's early records on the radio. He later admitted that every time he played Hey Porter or Cry Cry Cry, he felt he was introducing listeners to a voice that would change music forever. To him, Johnny was already the embodiment of what country music could be: honest, unpolished, and unforgettable. When they finally spoke for the first time, Willie was struck by something unexpected. For all his fame, Johnny was not distant or arrogant. He was sincere. The two men sat for hours, trading stories about life on the road, about heartaches that would not heal, and about music that sometimes felt like the only lifeline keeping them afloat. That night, they played guitar together, experimenting with songs that would never make it to radio but carried the raw energy of two artists who understood each other, without needing many words. Johnny saw in Willie a free spirit, who refused to let the industry cage him, while Willie saw in Johnny a survivor who had walked through fire and somehow found a way to sing about it. From that night forward, they were not just colleagues, they were bound by something deeper. Their friendship was not built on contracts or chart-topping hits, but on an unspoken recognition that each carried burdens too heavy to share with the world. And while the crowds only saw legends, behind the curtain, Willie and Johnny were simply two men clinging to music as their lifeline. What began as a late-night conversation in a Nashville bar quickly grew into something far more powerful. Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson were not just two men chasing songs. They were kindred spirits who recognized pieces of themselves in each other.
I first started noticing Johnny Cash back in, it had to have been the 50s maybe.
Johnny was already worn down by the weight of fame, by the expectations that came with being the man in black, and by demons he rarely admitted out loud. Willie, still struggling to find his place, carried the quiet frustration of being overlooked, of having his songs passed around to other singers, while his own voice went ignored. Together, they created a space where masks were not needed. Away from the stage lights, they would sit for hours, guitars in hand, sometimes talking, sometimes saying nothing at all. For Willie, those moments were proof that Johnny was not just an untouchable icon. He was human, bruised and battered by the same world that had once crowned him. And for Johnny, Willie was more than just a fellow musician. He was a reminder that not everyone in Nashville cared about image or headlines. They could share their victories, their regrets, even their failures without fear of judgment. Their friendship began spilling over into music. When Willie appeared on the Johnny Cash Show, the chemistry between them was undeniable. Johnny's thunderous baritone and Willie's softer offbeat phrasing did not compete. They complemented each other, creating performances that felt less like television moments and more like two friends telling stories through melody. Fans could sense it, even if they could not explain it. There was a bond between these men that went beyond rehearsals and stage presence. It was authenticity, rare and unfiltered. But it was not just about the songs. The two of them leaned on each other when the weight of the world became too heavy. For Johnny, whose personal battles were growing darker by the day, Willie became a steady hand, a reminder that someone believed in him even when he doubted himself. And for Willie, watching Johnny command a stage despite his struggles was proof that resilience was possible, that a man could fall and still rise with dignity. It was during these years that their friendship transformed into brotherhood. They were not just colleagues sharing a spotlight, they were companions walking the same dangerous road. And as the 60s gave way to the turbulent 70s, the challenges facing Johnny would test not only his strength but also the loyalty of everyone around him. Most walked away, but not Willie, because the real test of their bond was still to come. The years when Johnny Cash nearly lost everything. By the early 1970s, Johnny Cash was no longer just a country star. He was an American icon. But behind the sharp black suits and commanding voice was a man spiraling under the weight of fame, pressure, and inner demons he could not shake. His battles with addiction were no secret in Nashville, but what few people knew at the time was just how close he came to losing it all. Friends drifted away, managers grew frustrated, and even family members struggled to stand by him when the chaos became overwhelming. Yet through it all, Willie Nelson never turned his back. Rumors suggest that Willie often sat with Johnny during some of his darkest nights, talking him through the storms and reminding him of the man he still was beneath the struggles. Reports claim that when others wrote Cash off as finished, Willie quietly encouraged him to keep fighting, to keep writing, to keep singing, even when the world seemed ready to forget him. It has been said that Willie's patience and loyalty were the difference between Johnny collapsing completely and finding the strength to rise again. Willie knew firsthand how unforgiving the industry could be, and he refused to let Nashville's judgment bury his friend alive. There were nights when Johnny's performances faltered, his voice cracking under the weight of exhaustion, his hands trembling from battles he never spoke about publicly. But whenever Willie was near, something seemed to change. Fans who saw them together said there was an ease in Johnny's smile, a steadiness in his presence that only surfaced when Willie stood beside him. Perhaps it was because Willie never treated him like a broken star. He treated him like a brother who deserved another chance. Of course, Johnny was never one to surrender easily. Even in his lowest moments, he had a stubborn resilience that refused to be silenced. Willie admired that, and it became one of the cornerstones of their friendship. He once said that Johnny could fall harder than anyone he had ever known, but he could also stand back up stronger than anyone else. And each time he did, Willie was right there, ready to walk with him through the next chapter. But even as Johnny clawed his way back, their friendship was about to face a different kind of test, one that would play out not in the shadows, but on some of the biggest stages country music had ever seen, because out of their private struggles came one of the boldest musical experiments of their careers, a project that would bind them together forever in the eyes of the world. By the mid-1980s, Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson were no longer just respected artists. They were living legends. But instead of settling into nostalgia, they decided to rewrite country music history alongside two more giants, Waylon Jennings and Chris Christopherson. Together they became the Highwaymen, a supergroup unlike anything the genre had ever seen. It was not just four men singing songs. It was four outlaws with scars, stories, and a fire to prove that country music could still shake the world. When the group formed in 1985, the industry was skeptical. Could four powerful personalities with such different styles coexist without clashing? Reports claim that egos sometimes collided. Waylon's bluntness, Chris's poetic spirit, Johnny's authority, and Willie's free-flowing energy did not always blend easily behind closed doors. But on stage, none of that mattered. Fans did not see tension, they saw magic. And at the center of that magic was the bond between Johnny and Willie. Their voices, one deep and commanding, the other light and wandering, created a contrast so unique that audiences instantly recognized it as timeless. The group's debut single, Highwaymen, was more than just a hit. It became an anthem. Its haunting lyrics about rebirth and survival resonated with each of them. But for Johnny and Willie, it was almost autobiographical. Both had been through hell. Johnny with his addictions, Willie with his endless battles against Nashville's rules, and both had come out the other side still standing. Singing those lines together was not just performance, it was a statement of survival. Behind the scenes, insiders say Johnny and Willie leaned on each other to keep the group steady. When recording sessions grew tense, their private understanding helped diffuse conflicts. When tours demanded stamina, they pushed each other forward. Their friendship acted as the anchor, keeping the Highwaymen from falling apart under the weight of 4 massive egos. And even though every member left their mark, fans and critics alike often noted that the chemistry between Cash and Nelson felt like the heart of the project. For Willie, the Highwaymen was proof of something he already knew, that music could outlast pain, rumors, and even time itself. For Johnny, it was redemption, a chance to stand shoulder to shoulder with the only people who truly understood what it meant to live as both an outlaw and a legend. And for the fans, it was the confirmation of what they had always suspected, that Johnny and Willie were not just collaborators, they were inseparable. Away from the lights, away from the fans, Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson shared a side of themselves that the public never saw. Their friendship was not built on chart positions or sold-out arenas. It was built in quiet rooms, often in the dead of night, when guitars were the only witnesses. Willie later revealed that some of the most powerful moments he had with Johnny were not on stage at all, but in those late-night conversations where nothing was scripted. They would sit for hours, sometimes talking about music, sometimes about life, and sometimes about the weight that comes with being seen as more than human. Johnny, who carried his pain behind a stern exterior, opened up to Willie in ways he never did with anyone else. Rumors suggest that he shared regrets, fears, and doubts that never made it into interviews or memoirs, things he only trusted Willie to hear. There were nights, Willie recalls, when Johnny seemed exhausted by fame, as if the man in black persona had become more of a burden than a shield. Willie did not judge. He listened. He understood the loneliness that comes with stardom because he carried it himself. Some reports claim that when Johnny hit low points, struggling with his inner demons, Willie was one of the only friends who stayed close, checking on him, keeping him company, reminding him that he was not alone. That loyalty became the foundation of their bond. It was not about rescuing each other. It was about standing shoulder to shoulder when the world felt unbearable. And perhaps that is why their collaborations carried such weight. Fans could sense something beyond performance. They could feel the unspoken understanding between them. When Johnny sang with Willie, there was a gentleness in his delivery, a rare softness that surfaced only when he was with his brother in arms. For Willie, those moments were proof that music was not just entertainment, it was survival. But what makes this bond even more fascinating is what Willie has begun revealing in his later years. At 92, he admits there were things Johnny said in private that still echo in his mind today. Words about mortality, about mistakes, about forgiveness. Willie never shares everything, perhaps out of respect for a friend who can no longer speak for himself. But what he has revealed paints a picture of Johnny not as an untouchable legend, but as a man who struggled, fought, and found solace in the presence of one true friend. And yet, even with all that loyalty, nothing could prepare Willie for the day he would have to face life without Johnny. In September of 2003, the world lost Johnny Cash. Fans mourned the legend, but for Willie Nelson, it was like losing a piece of himself. For decades, Johnny had been more than a collaborator. He was a brother, a confidant, the one person who understood the weight of walking through fame with scars no one else could see. Willie later admitted that when Johnny died, he did not just grieve for a friend. He felt as though an entire era of his life had closed forever. The stages they had shared, the songs they had built together, the long nights of music and honesty, all of it suddenly became memories too heavy to revisit. For a while, Willie stayed quiet. He did not rush to speak publicly, did not try to define Johnny's life with sound bites or polished tributes. Some speculated it was because the pain was too raw. Others believe he held on to Johnny's secrets out of loyalty, refusing to let the world pick apart the private conversations they once had. Whatever the reason, Willie carried that silence for years. It was not until his 90s that he began to open up more, finally letting the world glimpse the truths he had guarded. In interviews, he spoke about how he first heard Johnny on the radio back in the 50s, spinning his records as a DJ in Texas, already sensing that this was no ordinary singer. He spoke about the bond they built away from cameras, the kind of connection that does not fade even when one half is gone. and he admitted that Johnny's resilience, the way he fell, got back up and faced the world again, was something that shaped his own journey. But Willie also confessed something deeper, that Johnny's absence still lingers, that even now, when he steps on stage, he sometimes feels as though Johnny is there beside him, playing that invisible second guitar only he can hear. What makes Willie's words so powerful is not just what he says, but what he does not. He never reveals every detail of their conversations, never exploits their friendship for headlines. Instead, he gives glimpses, enough for fans to understand that Johnny Cash's story was not just about music, but about survival, loyalty, and the rare kind of friendship that outlives death. Willie has said, "Johnny was not just my friend, he was my brother." And when he says it, you can hear the truth in his voice, a truth carved out of decades of shared struggles and triumphs. Their story is not just about country music. It is about how true friendship endures beyond fame, beyond hardship, even beyond death. And that perhaps is the greatest lesson they left behind, that when everything else fades, loyalty and love are what echo forever.